Hi English teachers, this video is for you. This is part 5 in the series The Stages of a Grammar Lesson. And in this part we're going to be looking at accuracy practice of grammar, also called controlled practice. I'm Bjarne Vonsil. I've been working as a teacher, trainer and self-taught tutor for 25 years. In part 1 we looked at the lead-in stage for a grammar lesson. And in parts 2, 3 and 4 of the series we looked at 3 different ways of clarifying grammar. You can use any of these 3 depending on the level, the student's learning preferences and the grammar that you're teaching. The next logical stage would be to provide accuracy practice, or to give an opportunity for students to apply, practice and cement what they have just learned. And that means we have the stages of lead-in, clarification and then controlled practice. Now, there are obviously other ways that you can stage your lesson, but these are very common, and other ways of doing it we'll leave for another video. Now, to provide controlled practice, you can use a variety of activity types. For example, you could use a gap fill, you could use an oral drill, you could use multiple choice questions, or you could have students do prompted dialogues with an information gap. So why is this controlled practice business so important? Well, it bridges the clarification and the freer practice at the end, the fluency practice. So it prepares students to use language more accurately at the end of the lesson in, let's say, a role play activity or the like. Now, I've seen a lot of teachers applying controlled practice activities straight off the clarification, but sometimes it's not been so lucky. And one of the activity types I've seen which have not worked so well is when teachers provide practice by saying, now I'd like you to make sentences using the grammar you have just learned. So why is this not such a good idea? Well, because it doesn't have a context. And then it's not accuracy practice anymore, because students have to think about not only the grammar they've just learned, but think about what they're going to talk about. So that's too much, too early. The other problem I sometimes see is when we have written practice activities with a number of sentences, but all about different things. What I mean is, if you're going to clarify your grammar, saying using a travel context, then all the sentences in your controlled practice should be in the context of traveling. That way it's much easier for your students' brains to follow the train of thought of the activity, so that they can focus and concentrate on the grammar, not the context. Now, in an ideal world as well, you would need to, in your controlled practice stage, cover the 3 elements of language. What do I mean by the 3 elements of language? I mean, we need to focus on the meaning of the target language, the form, meaning how it's written, and the pronunciation, meaning, form and pronunciation. And even if you want to hit a home run on the controlled practice, you will also provide an information gap. So what's this information gap business? Well, it basically means that one student has some information the other student doesn't have, and they have to communicate to obtain that information from each other. So as an example, if I tell my students to ask each other, what's your name and do you study English? There's no information gap, because the listener already knows the answer. Of course he studies English, and of course I know his name. But if you ask them to find out information that they didn't know or couldn't know already, for example, have you ever studied another language, then there is an information gap, hence a reason for students to communicate clearly and to listen to each other. So let's have a look together at an example of an information gap activity where we have meaning, form and pronunciation. Let's have a look. Following the context of traveling by plane, I used in the clarification In the video about guided discovery, which focused on the past continuous, I would give students this activity, which focuses mainly on the pronunciation, the form, but also the meaning of the target language. I would give half the class a handout with some information, and the other half a handout with different information like this. So we would have a handout A with some information, a handout B with different information. Students should then see if they can find differences between the two travel stories by producing sentences like, "What was Hillary doing at 6 a.m.? She was packing her suitcase," B would answer. And then A would realize, Sam was sleeping. So here we have a difference. As students cannot see each other's pictures, they have to speak and listen to each other to find all the differences. Hence, there is a purpose for speaking. Here, there is a specific purpose to see if they can find a time when both Hillary and Sam were doing the same thing at the same time. To finish off, let's have a look at 5 tips for providing control practice. First of all, when you provide control practice through a gap fill activity, try not to have more than 1 gap for every 7 words. If you have more gaps, the sentence will lose coherence and will be quite impossible for students to do. Secondly, try to stick to the topic of the lesson, of the clarification stage, so that it's easy for students to follow the thinking process. Thirdly, remember to provide practice in meaning, form, and pronunciation. Fourth, when you provide controlled written practice of the grammar, have the students first do the activities individually so that they have thinking time, quiet time on their own to think about how to apply what they have learned. After that, you should put them in pairs to compare answers, so there could be an element of peer teaching, and also so that they can gain more confidence in their answers before the class feedback. And thirdly, this provides an opportunity for the teacher to monitor what's going on, to see where the problems were in understanding the grammar. And lastly, when doing oral control practice, try to provide for an information gap so that the communication becomes purposeful. Now, if I've done my job here, you should now have a better idea for when and how to provide controlled practice of grammar. In the next part of the series, we're going to, and this is going to be part 6 of course, we're going to be looking at providing freer practice of the grammar, meaning fluency practice of grammar. So follow us in the next video. Thank you.